and had a machete. And one of the gang lads that was about, so I just chopped its head off and carried it inside the pub and put it on the pool table. And more or less told them and asked them to stay away from the Hacienda, or the next time it'd be a human head. And they never came back.
Manchester, June 1991. 6 bouncers working for Top Guard security were violently stabbed and slashed by a gang, said to be like a wild pack of hyenas terrorising clubbers as they carried out the brutal attack mob-handed. But who was responsible, and why did they attack the London door firm who had won the contract for the Hacienda in 1991? The iconic Hacienda nightclub had reopened a month earlier, and years of violence had forced the co-founder of Factory Records, Tony Wilson, to shut the popular music venue temporarily. In 1982, the managers behind 2 seminal Manchester bands, Joy Division and New Order, converted an old red brick warehouse into a multi-floor nightclub. The Hacienda hosted an era-defining roster of rockers, including the Smiths, the Stone Roses, and Oasis. But that wasn't the scene that turned it into a money-making machine thwarted by gang problems. New Order had headed to the Spanish party island of Ibiza to record an album in 1986, and that's when the whole club scene erupted, along with ecstasy, says Peter Hook, New Order's bassist. We saw it, we brought people over to witness it, and we brought it back to Manchester. At first, it was just once a week, an Ibiza-style hot night, with palm trees, ice pops and loads of pills, all set to the pounding beats of Chicago house music and Detroit techno. But that grew, and the Hacienda became the spot for 100,000 local university students and ravers across Manchester and the north.
Podiums that you can climb onto that holds sort of like, say, 10, 12 people, and the stage that holds possibly like 100. And everyone's chanting to each other, and everyone's arms are going out to each other in time. Everyone dances in time, everyone moves in time to the music.
With the club scene thriving, ecstasy exploded, says Hook. All these middle-class kids were selling drugs, £30 a tab. They were making shit loads of money. It didn't take long for gangsters to spot what was happening. Between the first Ibiza night in 1988 and the self-imposed temporary closure in early 1991, there had been numerous acts of violence from warring gangs trying to take a foothold in the drug market. A feared gangster named White Tony Johnson and a gang from Cheetham Hill had threatened the door staff with guns after being refused entry, and the management had decided enough was enough. They needed to hit the pause button and rethink the security strategy. Anthony Johnson was allied with the Cheetham Hill gangs who specialised in armed robbery and drug distribution. They were at war with the notorious Moss Side gangs, but operated a more sophisticated criminal organisation involved in high-level armed robberies as well as drugs. Johnson was raised by grandmother Winnie Bennett, whose son Keith had been murdered by Ian Brady and Myra Hindley. The house he grew up in had a shrine to Bennett, whose body was never recovered from the moors. While his grandmother was consumed with grief, Tony set about making a name for himself as a gangster. The Cheetham Hill crew liked his bravado and soon gave him a job driving a gang leader around in a top-of-the-range Cosworth. He was also at the front of the Cheetham Hillbillies war with Moss Side and was reported to be a suspect in the murder of a rival gangster, Anthony Scratch Gardner. An armed robbery the police believe Anthony was involved in was the catalyst for his brutal murder, a short period before the Hacienda decided to reopen its doors. Over 300,000 was stolen in a security van robbery at Mumps Bridge, Oldham in November 1990, and until the heat cooled down, Anthony, allegedly, left £70,000 of the proceeds with a friend by the name of Desmond Noonan.
We've got more guns than the police, silly bastards. I'm down to 25 murders. Wow, a load of bollocks, innit?
24, wasn't it?
No, I didn't do 24.
The Noonans, a powerful Manchester crime family of Irish roots, had come to prominence with 4 of the brothers, Damien, Desi, Dominic and Derek, putting their stamp on the city. Armed robberies, drugs, pubs and security were their business, and they had a relationship with the Cheetham Hill gang. It was subsequently alleged in court a row broke out over the money when Desi only offered 40,000 of the 70,000 back to Anthony Johnson. Johnson erupted in fury and threats were made towards Desi and his brothers. It was a fatal mistake. Anthony and his friend Tony McKee met with the Noonan brothers and their friends. wheelchair-bound Paul Flannery and Michael Sharples outside the Penny Black pub in Cheetham. Owned by Derek Noonan, it is alleged a row broke out and Anthony and his friend were both shot by Flannery. As Anthony tried to make his escape, he was caught and executed with a shot to the back and head. McKee survived and managed to get away despite being wounded. The men were charged with murder and McKee was the star witness against them. He claimed he only turned Queen's evidence due to him and his partner receiving death threats. Desai, Flannery and the brothers argued they were friends with Anthony and had no reason to kill him. They claimed the allegations were made up due to a deal McKee had made with the gang responsible for the killing. The formidable QC Michael Mansfield defended the men, and despite death threats to Mary Monson's criminal solicitors, who represented the Noonans, they were all sensationally cleared by the jury and found not guilty. These shocking incidents unknowingly to the Hacienda club owners would lead to the Noonans becoming an integral part of the club's lucrative but violent future. Tony Wilson and his co-founders had returned full of optimism that they could solve the security issues at the Hacienda. On reopening in 1991, they had employed Top Guard Security, a big London firm who had assured them they had the manpower and experience to deal with the threats the Manchester gangs posed. They housed 3 head doormen in a secure flat in Manchester, and the majority 50-strong door team would be shuttled in every weekend from London. This way, with minimal local doormen, intimidation would be more difficult. White Tony Johnson, their chief protagonist, had been killed in an underworld dispute, and in a naive peace offering, they reached out to gang heads to invite them free of charge to the venue. They hoped this would appease them enough to keep their gangs from trying to muscle the new door team. The Moss Side gangs were not a problem for the club. They only came down for the jungle night, but the Cheetham Hill gang still posed potential threats. A new membership scheme with metal detectors had been brought in to wean out potential troublemakers. The police refused requests to help man the door, but wanted certain criteria to be met to appease themselves and the council. The reopening night was much publicised, with big numbers queuing around the block to sign up for the new membership scheme. Bouncers juiced to the gills, wearing paramilitary-style uniforms, patrolled the doorways. Alsatian dogs strained at their leashes as revellers filtered through the specially designed detectors to check for weapons. One partygoer, Ryan Day, who was there on the night, said the atmosphere was menacing but tinged with excitement. He had witnessed fights in the venue before, with dealers being battered with champagne bottles by rival fractions, but the hedonistic music and the ecstasy scene that went with it made the Hacienda unmissable. He described to me the moment he was queuing, when a large group of smartly dressed lads rocked up to the front entrance, 40-handed, and forced their way past the helpless doorman. These lads, according to a news report in a subsequent Daily Mirror report, were the Cheetham Hill gang. It read, "A drug gang gatecrashed the grand reopening of Britain's trendiest club, despite tough security. 30 thugs barged past bouncers at Manchester's Hacienda night spot, closed 3 months ago after violence between warring gangs. 60 police officers backed by a riot vehicle were called to throw out the smartly dressed Cheetham Hill mob after they refused management pleas to leave. Despite the beefed up security, the same old issues with the Cheetham Hill gang had resurfaced on opening night. However, Cheetham had problems of their own to deal with, and it was another powerful gang that made their move to muscle in on the lucrative night spot."
You get the rise of Salford, and our problems then became Salford based, not from down Regent Road here to take over and become the prime force in town, while the 2 black gangs from over there, the Gooch and the Pepper Tree on Moss Side, we had very little to do with, except once every 6 months when we did a jungle night.
Like a phoenix, Salford rose like a great big effing bird from the flames of rubbish burning on the Ordsall estate. A great big effing bird with wild staring eyes and a beak that would peck your effing head off if you dared to return its stare. Tony Wilson, Paul Massey and his friends were smart enough to know that there was money to be made at the Hacienda. They had controlled the upstairs at another Manchester club conspiracy before it closed in 1990 when a student was stabbed. The Salford lads were large in number, pulling tough working class lads from across the Salford estates. Massey, recently released from a prison sentence, saw the change in Manchester's club scene. Before getting sent down, the Quality Street gang ran all the pubs and clubs, but time had moved on, and the young, unruly Salford lads were taking charge. The QSG had no interest in the rave scene and were all now established businessmen and very wealthy. They had already bumped heads with the Salford firm, which had left several of their men badly injured, and were happy to keep their noses out of the ecstasy trough. An opportunity arose to make a show of the London doorman and make some high-level chess moves to get what they ultimately wanted: control of the club. There had been some incidents between the London doorman and Salford residences, and Paul Massey believed it amounted to disrespect. He rallied the lads and told them they should not stand for such disrespect, and they charged up to the venue wheel spinning outside before threatening the doorman. Massey, jumping out of his car, went up to the entrance and told them in no uncertain terms that he and his friends ran Manchester and all the clubs, not the doorman. They were told to let anyone from Salford in free or there would be trouble. It did not take long for reports to filter back that one muscle-bound doorman had thrown out one of the Salford lot's daughter's boyfriend for dealing. That to Massey was the excuse he needed. One night, soon after the Salford lads made their move, they arrived at the club in huge numbers, armed to the teeth, but the doorman had wisely locked the entrance. One of the staff inside the club opened a side door for them, and the young Salford men flooded in like starving hyenas and began attacking the bouncers, smashing, stabbing and glassing them in a frenzied attack. The doormen were on foreign soil and had quickly realised this was a thankless task, and had the fight knocked out of them as one from the local area was glassed and stabbed 4 times in the thigh. Another was stabbed with a Rambo knife, only a rib bone saving his life. Some of the bouncers ran, and clubbers fled the dance floor, as the remaining security were driven back to the main bar and battered mercilessly. Police arrived quickly and sealed everyone inside, and a helicopter purred above with spotlights to unveil any gang members on the loose. It was a swift and vicious attack that hospitalised 6 doormen with knife wounds and made unwanted headline news. The owners realised they still had a major problem on their hands, and the only way forward was to do a deal with the devil. Shortly after, they announced a deal with a local Salford security firm, and none other than the imperious Damien Noonan, recently cleared of murder, was given the head doorman's job. Damien was close friends with Paul Massey, and before you knew it, the Salford lads, led by Massey, made themselves at home at the Hacienda as their lucrative stomping ground. Over the next few years until its closure in June 1997, Massey and the Salford lot made thousands of pounds and controlled the Hacienda with an iron fist. The combination of the Noonans, Salford, and the likes of former armed robber Jason Coughlin helping with security, they were a very powerful unit. But nothing lasts forever, and as the Hacienda had its day in 1997, in the next 2 decades, Paul Massey, Desi Noonan, Damien Noonan, and many figures from the underworld in Manchester would meet their death. Legendary club owner Tony Wilson passed away from natural causes, but left an amazing legacy that will be etched into music history forevermore.